Perhaps one of the most underground, most controversial, and most interesting genres of music in the world has to be that of black metal. Many of you might be wondering, what exactly is black metal? In the earlier years of what was thrash metal music, many bands were forming with new and interesting concepts and album styles. The same goes for bands who wanted to have heavier and much more aggressive styles, donning death metal as the name for their genre. Throughout the early 1980s, the world was given several of these styles with acts that included the Big Four, most notably Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax, and Slayer, but we'll be covering other thrash groups during this period. In the UK, bands like Venom, Celtic Frost, and Hellhammer would steer the direction for a sound that normal thrash music groups were definitely not accustomed to. Donning all black clothing, leather, fiery visuals, and demonic lyrics, this is what would pave the way for the first wave of black metal, gaining their name from Venom's 1982 album by the same name. Groups around the world like Sodom of Germany and Sarcophago of Brazil would form to make much similar styles in a more death metal style, more gruesome art styles to include. Insert Bathory from Sweden, who brought forth their self-titled album in 1985, which had a much more raw and evil sound. Later on, in the northeastern side of Europe, the first wave would make its way over to countries like Norway, Finland, Poland, and even some parts of Russia and Greece. The first wave had such an impact on the youth of Scandinavia that bands of the cold lands would form their own. Bands like Immortal, Satricon, Burzum, and Emperor from Norway would pave the roads to what is now the sound of second wave black metal. Unlike the first wave, the second wave of black metal had a set sound. Groups like Mayhem and Darkthrone would focus on similar sounds to Bathory, a raw and garage sound. Best explained when recounting his career in the music, Varg Vikernes of Burzum would go to his local music store and proceed to purchase what would be a cheap guitar and amp, as well as a cheap microphone that the store had offered at the time. This would give any harsh vocals and a touch of unclean sound to the mix of any albums that he produced. Another difference between the first wave and second wave was that of the many bands that the first wave had were all acts. The bands would have claimed to believe and worship in a devil and have radical imagery to drive the thought. However, second wave groups actually believed most of it. Growing up on the sound, most second wave groups were very drawn to the belief of a devil, and some even believing in the old pagan gods, which would allow the creation of pagan black metal. A common theme to most of the bands, perhaps most notable in the second wave, was the use of corpse paint. A black and white paint that, as Dead of Mayhem once explained, was used to give off the presence on stage that you weren't alive while playing the music. Although several other acts had already used black and white face paint, much like that of Kiss, Merciful Fate, and even Alice Cooper, it was black metal which coined the term corpse paint. The year of 1994 was like a golden age for the albums of black metal groups, with the first full length of Mayhem, De Monsteris Dom Satanas, Transylvanian Hunger by Darkthrone, and The Forest Dream Eternally by Behemoth from Poland, Marduk's Opus Nocturne, and Rotting Christ's Non Serviam. Several other countries had their fair share of bands that, in hindsight, added to the genre's growing, with different groups coming to different concepts and sounds. The genre was one of that gained attraction to every country's ear, offering new and unique ideas to the world of music. Modern-day black metal bands tend to offer the most when it comes to both first and second wave. This now third wave of bands stemming from the late 1990s to the early 2000s and sometimes even later would include more experimental styles. A lot of the bands that follow in these earlier group footsteps take on the sounds of mainly death metal and try to keep the imagery of all black, wearing spikes and corpse paint, and sometimes even the devil and occult visuals. A handful of the second wave bands are still around to this day, and they continue to inspire and make coming artists of the genre. Many of the groups that gain light in the music subgenre are that of America's thrash crust punk Midnight, Kraft from Sweden, who carries a very heavy old school second wave style, and Poland's Waltuszka, who uses the imagery of Eastern Orthodox monks. Not to mention even South Africa's first black metal group, Demigoroth Santanum, which was founded in 2009.